Welcome back for the final installment in our unit on the Progressive Era. This time period was very eventful, and our government was busy responding to the problems that arose at the height of industrialization. We have spent lots of time talking about the political, social, and economic problems, as well as the women and minorities who stepped up to create change. Today, we are going to cover the political reforms that changed how our government operated in response to all of these difficulties the American public faced. So the essential question for today is as follows. What was the significance of reforms and constitutional amendments in the Progressive Era? As you are taking notes, focus on information that helps you answer this question. Before we get going, let's talk about some important vocabulary words. Some have alternate meanings that you are probably familiar with, while others are specific to discussing how our government functions. First, direct primaries are when people vote on candidates rather than parties choosing them. An initiative is when citizens can propose laws. Referendums, citizens can vote directly on laws rather than having representatives vote on them for them. And a recall removes public officials from office via public vote. Now that we have the important terminology under our belt, let's talk about the goals of the progressive movement. We know from previous lessons that the United States faced a lot of obstacles as a result of industrialization, immigration, and political corruption. We did not have laws in place to protect the public prior to this time because we had no idea what would unfold. As I've stated previously, the United States didn't have a roadmap or directions on the right way to industrialize because we'd never done it before on this scale. But once problems began to crop up, people began to fight for their rights and better conditions, and these three items were their biggest goals. First and most importantly, progressives wanted a government that was controlled by the people, meaning its citizens. This shouldn't have been a new idea because our founding documents literally call for a government for the people, by the people. But political corruption abounded, and many politicians and businesses of the time were looking out for themselves and their friends. Businesses were affecting government decisions, and this was terrible for the public. That brings us to our second goal, the regulation of big business. Progressives wanted to provide fair economic opportunities for all citizens. Third, progressives wanted to eliminate social injustices against minorities, immigrants, and the poor. So who could we turn to? Robert La Follette was one of the first politicians to support a government controlled by the people. For that reason, I've already mentioned him in a previous lesson, but let's review. La Follette was a Republican governor of Wisconsin before being chosen as a U.S. Senator. In these offices, he championed the people's right to elect their representatives via direct primaries. He also pushed for other progressive political reforms like initiatives, referendums, and recalls. What all three of these have in common is the intention to give the people the power to decide who represents them and what laws matter to them. With these tools, they could put laws up to a nationwide vote, remove corrupt officials from office before the end of their term, and truly make their voices heard. Lastly, due to the efforts of people like La Follette, the United States saw the ratification of 4 progressive constitutional amendments. First, the 16th Amendment related to government funding and equitably taxing the public for public services. This amendment allowed the federal government to collect income tax from all working citizens. The 17th Amendment allows for the direct election of senators. Prior to its passage, senators were chosen by the political parties and were appointed for a 6-year term. In this former system, the American public did not have a say in who represented them. With the passage of the 18th Amendment, due to the efforts of people like Carrie Nation, the sale of alcohol was banned throughout the United States. And lastly, the 19th Amendment was a big win for women and democracy as a whole. Prior to its passage, only half of the adult population in the United States could legally vote. And in order for a representative democracy to function, it is vital that all populations' voices are heard. The United States made great strides toward this goal with the legalization of women's suffrage, or the right for women to vote. We still had a way to go in eliminating barriers preventing African Americans from voting, but it was a major positive step. Another important figure in the progressive movement is good old Teddy Roosevelt. We know him for his role in American imperialism, his contributions to the Rough Riders, and his refusal to annex Hawaii. But now we need to look at his role as president in the American economy. As a result of industrialization, we've learned that monopolies were a major problem for small businesses, competition, and working conditions. However, up until this point in American history, we had what was known as a laissez-faire economy, meaning the government did not involve itself in the affairs of the economy or businesses. However, this all changed with the progressive era. First, Roosevelt is known for his square deal. Square deal was a common phrase meaning a fair transaction. It came to be connected with Roosevelt's legislative program, which was a plan to keep the wealthy from taking advantage of the poor and small businesses. Next, Teddy Roosevelt was also known as a trust buster. This was related to the Sherman Antitrust Act, which previously outlawed monopolies. Roosevelt was known for strengthening and enforcing this law to benefit small businesses and lower consumer costs. Beyond just monopolies and general business dealings, Theodore Roosevelt was known for several other important contributions. The Meat Inspection Act prohibited the sale of adulterated or misbranded livestock and similar products as food and ensured that livestock were slaughtered and processed under sanitary conditions. In other words, the consumer needed to know what the meat was that they were purchasing and that it was processed under clean conditions. Likewise, the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 was the first of a series of significant consumer protection laws which was enacted by Congress and led to the creation of the Food and Drug Administration, otherwise known as the FDA. Lastly, Teddy Roosevelt was the first president to really focus on our natural resources and work to protect them. The Antiquities Act of June 8, 1906, enabled President Roosevelt and succeeding presidents to proclaim historic landmarks, historic or prehistoric structures, and other objects of historic or scientific interest in federal ownership as national monuments. The last important figure that we are going to discuss is President Woodrow Wilson. During his time in office, he issued what was called the New Freedom. This was his plan for the government to regulate corporations. In this plan, Wilson offered a progressive vision calling for the use of government power to break up monopolies, curb corporate power in politics, promote economic competition, and restore a vibrant and healthy economy where small businesses and workers could thrive. During his time in office, he pushed for the Clayton Antitrust Act. Its passage strengthened the Sherman Antitrust Act and exempted unions from being prosecuted. Now that we've reached the end, let's take a moment to reflect on the legacy of the progressive era. After all of that, what has changed? First, we have lasting reforms that are still in place today. Second, the government began to protect the people rather than businesses and politicians. Federal agencies were created to regulate those businesses. However, we still have some problems that they dealt with then that are still affecting us now. But now people can see and can affect positive change.